If you're looking for the most productive crop of all, it's hard to beat the ever-dependable zucchini or courgette, so long as you get it right. This famously prolific veggie yields fruits all summer long. All you have to do is pick them. But while we expect them to be prolific, they can sometimes be a little tricky to set fruit early on in the season. But worry not, with the tips I'm about to share, you can make sure that your plants reach the peak of their fruit pumping potential. You know summer's finally arrived when it's time to plant out your zukes, or as I prefer to call them, courgettes, which translates rather sweetly to baby marrows, which is in fact what they are. And with spring rapidly waning and the last of the frosts now behind us, these guys are primed to get in there and get growing away. This year I'm growing two types, a beautiful yellow fruited variety and a lovely ribbed courgette, both of which look fantastic on the plate. Now I know which is which because the yellow fruited varieties here tend to have slightly yellowed leaves, so this is perfectly healthy, it's just the way it is. In this bed here I'm going to plant my yellow fruited courgettes or zucchini, and I'm going to put 3 in here, and this has had plenty of manure added in the winter, so it's nice and rich. Courgettes or zucchini are very heavy feeders. You can often see squash family plants typically growing out, thrusting out from compost heaps. So it really is very hard to give them too much in the way of nutrients. So what I'm going to do is dig a nice kind of deep hole and then fill the bottom of it with some lovely garden-made compost to really turn up the volume on these things and really speed things up. Now I'm going to return a little bit of the soil here, and then just for added oomph, a tiny bit of organic fertiliser. This is just blood, fish and bone. There are of course vegan alternatives if you prefer. There we are, and just tickle that in. And now to plant the zouk, and what a beaut. That almost rhymes. It's quite easy to get poetic when you're working with such beautiful plants like this. There we are, and with that planted, I'm now going to use the rest of the excavated soil to make a little kind of ring around the plant. And what this will do is just kind of hold in place some of the water when I do water it, so it has a chance to percolate down rather than just running off. You'll see what I mean in a minute, and it just makes use of every last drop. By growing 3 plants together, quite close together like this, what I'm actually doing is I'm dramatically improving the chances of fruit set early on in the season. You see, if I'm growing more than 1 plant, the chances of there being both male and female flowers open at the same time is greatly improved. And it also makes the job of the bees a little bit easier as they buzz between the blooms. They work hard enough for us, so I reckon it's worth doing all we can to help them. Now, as a minimum, I would say grow 2 zucchini or courgettes together for this very reason, but yeah, 3's even better. One thing I should mention at this point is that early on in the season at least, you're likely to get many more male flowers than female flowers, which are of course the precursor to our fruits. So don't worry about this, it really is perfectly normal. The female flowers will come in time once plants are a bit bigger and have found their feet and got a bit more bulked out. But if you do find yourself with lots of male flowers early on in the season, why not pick them to eat? They're quite delicious, and I've got a little secret to share with you about how to use them, which I'll reveal a bit later on. And now to puddle them in with a drop of the wet stuff. Now it's a lovely sunny warm day today, but it can still get a little bit chilly at night. No frosts, but a little bit fresh. So what I could do is, if my plants are a little bit smaller, is pop something like this little cut off plastic bottle here and just bury it into the soil over the plant, and then use a stick just to hold it in place like that. Maybe bank it up a bit and then leave that there till the plants need the extra room. Keep the lid off, this will stop it from getting too hot, and it'll also protect the young plants somewhat from slugs too. My plants are a little bit bigger, however, so I'm just going to cover them very simply with a layer of row cover of this sort of fleece here. So just pop it over, secure it in place, and I'll keep this here for maybe 2 weeks, just till it's consistently warmer at night. And obviously once they flower, the bees will need to get in to pollinate. There's still plenty of time to sow zucchini or courgettes in most regions, and you can sow them anytime from mid-spring to mid-summer. They grow that fast that even a summer sowing should produce plenty of fruit before the cold weather returns. Now, to start with, I'm doing something a bit odd, you might think. I'm using my nail clippers here just to make a tiny indent into the seed casing like that, just enough to pierce the coat without damaging the delicate embryo inside it. Now, what this will do is just make it easier for the moisture to get into the main meat of the seed, and it'll just speed things up by a couple of days. Any seed that sits in the potting soil for any period of time is more at risk of rotting, so anything we can do to speed things up is going to be welcome. Now, don't worry if you're not confident about doing this. It's now nice and warm, and these should germinate pretty quickly anyhow. I just like to do it to speed things up. The seeds are quite big and they produce equally big and clunky seedlings, so I'm going to use a nice sized plug tray like this, which is much bigger than if I was, say, sowing onions or beet or beetroot seeds, for example. So no need to sift or sieve this kind of potting mix here. It can go in just as it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sow the seed on its side like that. If it was sat like that, then the water might collect on top and potentially cause it to rot. Not such a problem at this time of year as it's warming up nicely, but a consideration nonetheless. And so just dib a little hole about 1 inch or 2 centimeters deep, and then put your seed down like that and cover over. All members of the squash family, or cucurbits, which include the likes of cucumber and melon, for example, germinate super quickly if they're given somewhere nice and warm and are kept consistently moist. And once these guys are up, they will positively rocket away. These guys will go from sowing to planting time within 3 weeks, and often as quickly as 2. They grow that fast. So don't be tempted to sow them too early in the season. Wait till it's a bit warmer and do what you can to protect them from chillier nights, either with a couple of rows of fleecy row cover or simply by bringing them inside on chillier nights. Now, the temperature we're aiming for is to keep them above about 50 Fahrenheit or 10 Celsius. As I think I may have mentioned already, zucchini grow fast, sometimes taking 2 months or even less to go from this to this. That's really fast, and it gives us an opportunity to get clever with when we sow them. I find that older plants can sometimes slow down and inevitably become riddled with powdery mildew. So one option, if you are in a warmer climate, is to make a sowing maybe 2 weeks before your last frost date to have young plants to go out after the risk of frost has passed. And then make another sowing 2 months later to have young plants ready from midsummer onwards. Now, the logic behind this is that as your first sowing is getting a bit older and slowing down, you've got vigorous new plants waiting in the wings to replace them. In warmer climates with reliably long summers of unbroken sunshine, then you might want to try sowing even more often, maybe once a month, to have a steady supply of live fast, die young plants that'll pump out the fruits like a horticultural Tommy gun. If you live somewhere with either squash bugs or borers, firstly I do empathise. These insects can gorge on your plants, turning them to rags, reducing fruiting, or worse still, killing them entirely. The easiest way around this is to try and get a harvest as soon as possible before these bothersome bugs rear their unwanted heads from about midsummer. Pick a super fast, early maturing variety and plant it as soon as you dare. Something that matures as soon as 50 days from sowing is ideal, and many seed packets should detail how long it takes to go from sowing to harvest. With any luck, you'll get plenty of pickings before the bugs turn up, but once they do, just be sure to get on your row covers promptly to keep the insects out. But bear in mind that it'll also keep out the bees, so you'll need to remove the covers every couple of days and hand pollinate your flowers. But don't worry, I've got a video on precisely how to do that, which I'll link to in the description. Zucchini is super keen and will almost certainly do you proud, but there are a few things to keep an eye on to get the best from them. First of all, keep your plants well watered. Not only will this support rapid growth and of course production of those long-awaited fruits, it will also help to avoid problems with powdery mildew, that disease that causes white blotches on the leaves. You see, periods of completely dry soil followed by wet really encourages that disease, so consistent moisture will help to avoid that. And you might want to consider applying a mulch of something like dried grass clippings over the surface just to lock in more of that soil moisture. Good airflow will help to reduce the risk of plants getting mildew, or at least slow the risk down. Now in this bed, I've got my plants in each sort of corner here. I'm going to train them up and away from each corner, which will greatly help with that airflow. Plants can get really quite big, but our garden planner can help you get the spacing just right for this and of course many other crops. You can make a preventative remedy against powdery mildew very simply by just mixing together 1 part cow's milk, and it does have to be cow's milk, and then 9 parts water like this. Mix it together and then just spray this on both the top sides and the undersides of your leaves. Do this on a morning if you can and on a nice still day, and repeat maybe once every couple of weeks. And that should slow the progress or potential progress of your powdery mildew. Now, when leaves do get affected and get badly affected, just cut off the worst affected leaves, because the new leaves that grow to replace them are likely to be fresh and unaffected. Older plants inevitably decline as they get increasingly riddled with mildew. Now this is one reason why making regular sowings can really help, because as plants start to kind of shut down as they get more infected, you'll have fresh young new plants ready to go in to replace them. There'll almost certainly be enough fertility from the compost you added at planting time, but there's no harm in giving plants an additional boost by tickling in a nice balanced organic fertiliser maybe a month or 2 after planting. You could also go in with something like a liquid tomato feed or a seaweed feed once plants start to flower, to really give them the oomph they need to produce the delectable fruits that we're after. Once plants start fruiting, there is no stopping them. The secret to keep them coming is to pick them regularly, and pick them young. I reckon they're best no bigger than just 6 inches or 15 centimetres long. That may seem small, but fruits these size have a much firmer texture and a far superior taste. Now the plants can be a little bit spiky and spiny, so wear gloves if that irritates your skin. And whatever you do, don't let your fruits grow too big. Once they get to something approaching marrow-sized, the plant will think it's beginning to do its job in setting seeds and will really start to slow down, and we don't want that. Oh, and my little tip for enjoying that glut of male flowers early on in the season: just stuff the flowers with ricotta and parsley, seal the petals back up, and then dip in batter and fry them off. This is absolutely sensational. I first tried this in Italy. I think it's called fiori di zucca, and my goodness, is it a revelation. It just tastes mind-blowing. Like anything you grow yourself, there's way more choice of varieties for the gardener, from round or yellow fruits to your common or garden but no less tasty standard green varieties. While colourful types do look pretty on the plate, in all honesty, for sheer productivity, there's no beating the standard green varieties. So if sheer productivity of your plants and profusion of fruits is all you're after, well, just opt for one of those. Once zucchini really hits its stride, it can be tricky to keep up with them. Try them sweated down with a little bit of butter, steamed, even grated into cakes. But if you do get a bit overwhelmed, don't forget National Sneak Some Zucchini Onto Your Neighbour's Porch Day. I kid you not, I promise I haven't made this up. This year it runs on the 8th of August, and if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, then I'm sure you could try this in your summer too. Launch your garden into hyper-productive mode with plenty of tips, including how to grow a whopper of a pumpkin, courtesy of the abridged version of my book. Now you can get your muddy hands on a copy for free just by following the link or the QR code over here. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will catch you next time.